Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be going over Phase 2 of What If DC Made a Cinematic Universe Before Marvel. And I know it's been a while since I made Phase 1, and that's because I wanted to focus on more Marvel related content. But seeing as how I recently released Phase 6 of my fixed multiverse saga, I figured it'd be a pretty good time to head back into DC and continue with Phase 2. And without further delay, let's begin. Kicking this phase off will be Superman, Man of Tomorrow. And I know what you're probably wondering, and I'm going to take a cue off the MCU Spider-Man trilogy where they used the word home. Well, in this Superman trilogy I want to make, I'll be using the word man as the subtitles. And plus, I think it pretty much fits Superman pretty well, as he's a relatively simple guy, and I think simple titles could really reflect that. And so this movie would basically be the aftermath of the Justice League movie, where everyone is still recollecting themselves after the attack of Steppenwolf and the Parademons. And I really want to delve into Superman's character, as well as his developing relationship with Lois Lane, in which I would have Superman propose during the duration of the film. So it'll sort of be like the Spider-Man 3 plot where Peter was trying to propose to MJ, but except Lois would actually say yes and a wedding would ensue, in which would ultimately be interrupted by an alien transmission, an alien which we would recognize as General Zod, who I would have be the main villain of this movie, played by the same actor who played him in the original Man of Steel movie, of course, since I thought he was phenomenal. And General Zod's motivation would roughly be the same as it was in the original Man of Steel, except this time it took him much longer to find Clark. And so Superman would eventually confront General Zod, and Zod would still try to convince him to join him in his forces and try and revive Krypton through Earth. And Superman would obviously disagree, which would enrage Zod, and he would proceed to attack Superman. And Zod would also be accompanied by his henchmen, in which I don't think I could remember their names, even with a gun to my head. Lex Luthor would also make an appearance in this movie, and he would see Zod's invasion as an opportunity to further slander Superman, seeing as how he thinks that Superman is the reason that these alien invaders are attacking Earth in the first place. In which, would he be wrong? Well, not really. But surprisingly, Lex Luthor would also be a big help in stopping Ground Zero. But we all know he's not really doing it for the people. He's more or less doing it to increase his public perception. And also, since Superman is fairly experienced, he'll lead Zod away from civilization, so there won't be nearly as much property damage as there was in the original Man of Steel. And so Superman would proceed to battle against Zod and his henchmen that I still can't name. Superman would defeat Zod by the end, and this might be a controversial choice, but I would choose to keep Superman snapping Zod's neck, as I believe that was an interesting character decision by Zack Snyder, and I feel like it could be further developed later down the line. And the encounter with Zod would also give Superman the idea of creating the Fortress of Solitude. And so, the movie would end with Superman and Lois Lane, now newlywed, looking forward to their bright futures ahead. Superman especially, seeing as how he now has a new family, in which maybe he won't be so lonely after all. But we would then get a post-credit scene into the deep reaches of space, where we would see a lone space pod traveling through the stars. In that space pod, we would see a familiar crest, the House of El. The camera would shift further inside of the space pod, and we would see a young blonde girl seemingly asleep, not knowing of where the space pod seems to be traveling to. We would then look at the schematics, in which we would see that the space pod is traveling to Earth. The next movie will be Shazam, and nothing would really change. Everything would relatively stay the same, except this movie would actually release around Christmas time, but besides that, there's nothing I would really change about this film. After Shazam will be Wonder Woman 1984. And this would basically be a better version of the original movie with an actual cohesive plot. And I would have the main villain be Dr. Psycho. Cheetah would still be the secondary antagonist, and the plot would relatively stay the same but way more improved. After this film will be Batman Under the Red Hood. And this movie will essentially be a straight adaptation of the animated movie Under the Red Hood, and the general plot will still stay the same. And if anything, I wouldn't really change anything about it, but I would add some stuff to it just to make the story more compelling. So, for example, I would add Amanda Waller and her task force in this movie. Not Task Force X, but just a bunch of henchmen that work for her. And her role in this film will basically be an antagonistic role to Batman, where she'll play a similar role to what she played in the Telltale series, where she doesn't really approve of Batman's methods of handling Gotham, and she took it upon herself to go to Gotham and clean up Batman's mess, so to speak. And I would also add Talia al Ghul in this movie as well, since the origin I want to go with here is that Ra's al Ghul felt bad for Batman after the death of Jason Todd. So, without Batman's knowledge, he dug up Jason's grave, took his corpse, and threw him into the Lazarus pit, in which, as we all know, has severe consequences. And Jason was resurrected, but it was at the cost of his mental state. So, in a frenzy, he killed most of Ra's al Ghul's guard and escaped from his temple. And so Ra's al Ghul has sent Talia to deal with this situation. Batman, of course, would be furious that Ra's al Ghul desecrated Jason's grave. And he tells Talia once all this is over, he'll pay him a visit. This movie would also see the first appearance of Robin, who will be Tim Drake, who is roughly 16 years old at this time. And Nightwing would also make a cameo in this movie as well. And so, even though Batman is in the title, this movie would mainly center around Jason Todd's psyche and how his mind has been warped, and he's basically hunting down the Joker, who in this movie and further on, he'll be played by William Dafoe, as due to Heath Ledger's passing. Batman would then later confront the Red Hood, where Red Hood would reveal that he has Joker captive and gives Batman the choice of shooting him or the Joker. Batman would of course refuse, which would result in a clash between both Batman and Red Hood, in which Batman would eventually come out on top and unmasks the Red Hood, revealing Jason Todd. Joker would of course find all of this hysterical and would be dying of laughter. As Batman was about to restrain Jason, Amanda Waller and her task force jump into the scene and would cause just enough of a distraction for Jason to escape, and Joker being taken into custody. And so the movie would end with Batman telling Amanda Waller that if she and her task force doesn't get out of his city, he'll leak secrets about her that he's pretty sure her superiors wouldn't be too fond of. This, of course, would deter Amanda Waller, and she'll stay away from Gotham for now. We would get a scene of Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, and Alfred visiting the grave of Jason Todd. Talia would also make her appearance, giving Bruce a certain set of files, and she tells him that this might be important for him to read into. Talia would depart, but not before kissing Bruce on the cheek before she leaves. Bruce Wayne would open the files that Talia gave him, and it would reveal the whereabouts of Jason's location. Batman would look at Dick and Tim and would tell the pair that they don't have to come with him, as he feels as if he needs to do this alone. "We know," Dick says. "So when do we start?" We would get a post-credit scene of Amanda Waller walking through a certain facility, and she is accompanied by Rick Flag, and both of them are talking about a certain task force. Batman and his colorful frat of freaks has gotten too comfortable ordering the government around, so I'd say it's time that we make our own super team. And the camera would shift into a TV screen revealing surveillances of criminals in their cells until the screen would then linger on until we would see the title of the top of the monitor, Task Force X. The movie following will be Green Lantern Corps, and the main Green Lantern I'd want for the DCEU would be John Stewart. Hal Jordan in this movie will take up more of a mentorship role to John Stewart, which means he'll be much older as well as more experienced. Similar to how James Gunn wants to portray the Green Lanterns in his new DC universe. So Hal Jordan would have been a Green Lantern for a while, roughly about 20 years. Sinestro will be in this movie as well, but he'll be posed as a Green Lantern as he hasn't turned evil yet. So the main villain I'm thinking of for this movie will be Atrocitus and the Red Lantern Corps. And this movie would essentially be our gateway into the cosmic side of the DC universe. So I really want to explore that through explaining the different Lantern Corps as well as more world building. I also want to portray Sinestro as more of a good guy, so when he does turn evil, the audience would actually feel that emotional impact. Also, it would be revealed that throughout the duration of the movie, Atrocitus is working for Darkseid, so they would have that Ronin and Thanos dynamic where Darkseid would constantly belittle Atrocitus, and Atrocitus would eventually be fed up and would vow to kill Darkseid, but not until taking care of his main threat, the Green Lantern Corps. Speaking of Darkseid, I would have him make a cameo in this movie, similar to how Thanos had a cameo in Guardians 1. The movie would end with John Stewart, with the help of Hal Jordan and all the other Green Lantern Corps, managing to defeat Atrocitus and subdue the Red Lantern Corps into submission. And the Red Lantern Corps would agree to keep the peace, for now at least. We would get a post-credit scene of John thanking Hal Jordan for his help, as well as helping him master his abilities. Hal Jordan would then ask John if he really has to go, which John would respond that he's feeling a little homesick and he'd think it might be well that he visit his home planet, which is Earth. John would then ask Hal if he wants to come with him. Hal would hesitate, but would say maybe next time, as he still has some damage control to do after Atrocitus' little stunt. And so with that, John Stewart would head off to his next destination, Earth. The next movie after this will be The Flash 2. And it would be in this film where Wally West would first get his powers and become the Kid Flash, which would result in a bit of a dynamic between both Barry Allen and Wally West, similar to Iron Man and Spider-Man from the MCU, where Barry Allen is mentoring Wally West and trying to help him adapt to his new set of powers. Meanwhile, Wally West is excited that he's getting to work alongside his hero. Also, there won't be a singular villain in this movie, rather a villain group, which will be the Rogues. And the lineup I'm thinking of will be Captain Code, Captain Boomerang, Mirror Master, Heatwave, Weather Wizard, and the Trickster. And the way I would handle it at first would be I would have a montage of where Flash would individually take on each of these villains and take them into custody. These villains would then meet with each other in jail and would come up with a strategy in order to finally take care of the Flash. And so they would agree to join forces, and with the help of Mirror Master, they managed to escape from prison and set out towards their goal of killing the Flash. I would also use this movie as an opportunity to further give Flash more character development, as now he is not only a superhero, but a mentor as well. And Wally West is still trying to get used to his powers, so he's not really that great at it. In fact, he pretty much kind of sucks, but that's to be expected as he just recently got his powers. And so while Flash is mentoring Wally, The news would proceed to show the rogues causing havoc in Central City. This would of course alert the Flash and he would suit up. Wally would want to come as well, but the Flash would tell him to sit back as he doesn't feel like he's ready to take on any major villains yet. And so the Flash would speed off to the rogues' location, in which he would confront them and proceed to have an epic battle. But unfortunately, the rogues cover for each other's weaknesses, and thus the Flash would get overwhelmed and the rogues would come out on top. But just before they can kill the Flash, a red and yellow streak dashes towards the battle scene, carries out the Flash, and brings him out of the battlefield. This would reveal to be Wally West, who was watching through the news and saw Flash getting bodied. This would really destroy Barry's confidence as he not only got destroyed by those villains, but he also feels as if he failed Wally as a mentor. And we'll get this touching scene between Barry and Wally, just to showcase these two characters in a more emotional light. This scene would then later give Barry the motivation to keep fighting, and so with the help of Wally West, both the Flash and Kid Flash would run off to the battlefield to deal with the rogues. And with Wally's help, the Flash actually manages to subdue and defeat the villainous group and send them off back to prison. The movie would end with both the Flash and Kid Flash looking forward towards the bright future ahead as they proceed to dash off into Central City, going out for their patrol. We would then later get a post-credit scene of one of the members from the Rogues, Captain Boomerang, being dragged off into a separate room where he would be confronted by Amanda Waller. Captain Boomerang would be confused until Amanda would tell him that what if she can offer him something more in life and a guarantee of a shorter sentence. Captain Boomerang would be intrigued and would proceed to hear Amanda Waller out. She would then proceed to say that she has a special assignment for him, something confidential, but it would also be at the same time something that he might find to be very beneficial. The next movie following will be Suicide Squad. And the lineup would be a little different than it was in the original movie. So this is how I would imagine the team would look like. And this movie would explore each of their backstories in the same manner as it did in the original Suicide Squad movie. Also, another change I would make is I would have the main villain be Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. Amanda Waller will assign a mission to the Suicide Squad, telling them that they'll need to travel to Ra's al Ghul's temple so they can take a sample of the Lazarus Pit and bring it back to their labs. Amanda Waller feels as if the properties of the Lazarus Pit is wasted at Ra's al Ghul's temple and that it could be beneficial for not only the country but the world. So the Suicide Squad would travel to Arabia. And there will of course be some banter among the teammates, and their interactions would pretty much go about of what you would expect. And the Suicide Squad would make their way to Arabia and confront Ra's al Ghul and his League of Assassins, which of course they wouldn't really last long as Ra's al Ghul has trained his assassins well and the Suicide Squad would get captured and imprisoned. But it would later then be revealed that the Suicide Squad getting captured was part of Amanda Waller's plan, as she knew that they wouldn't stand a chance against Ra's al Ghul, and they only managed to serve as a distraction for her to have one of her inside agents, Black Spider, to receive a sample from the Lazarus Pit without Ra's al Ghul knowing. But unfortunately, Black Spider would be caught by Talia al Ghul and would then later be killed, leaving Amanda Waller frustrated as her contingency plan backfired, and she would mark this as a failure and would not look deeper into it, seeing as how her task force is already captured and are most likely to be killed. We look back on the temple, where we would see Captain Boomerang distracting one of the guards, and this would allow King Shark to break through his chains, kill the guard, and free the rest of his teammates. And this would of course lead into a final clash between the Suicide Squad and the League of Assassins, as well as Ra's al Ghul. And this time they're much better prepared, and they manage to escape from the temple and return back to the helicopter in which they came from. They return back to the prison where Amanda Waller is shocked that they are still alive, as well as they show her the sample that they received from the Lazarus pit. And so, as promised, the team would receive lighter sentences, but there would still be returns back to their cells. But we would then later get a post-credit scene of the Joker breaking out Harley Quinn, similar to that ending of the original Suicide Squad movie. After this will be Justice League Doom. And as you might expect, I'd have the main villain of the sequel be the Legion of Doom. And similar to Under the Red Hood, this would be more of a live-action adaptation of the animated Justice League Doom movie, where the Legion of Doom managed to take hold of Batman's contingencies planned against the Justice League and use it against them, which in turn would make the Justice League furious at Batman. And they feel betrayed that Batman just misused their trust like that. Surprisingly, the only one who could see Batman's reasoning was Superman, and he tries to defend Batman, but it's ultimately 2 against 4, and Batman is forced to leave the Justice League for now. After Batman's departure, the rest of the Justice League would track down the Legions of Doom's location using Cyborg satellite, and they would diverge to that location where they would confront the villains, and what pursues is another fight. But the Justice League are more prepared this time, so they stand a better chance. But Lex Luthor would say that he has an ace up his sleeve, and with a press of a button, the ground would start to shake before Solomon Grundy would emerge from the ground and grab Superman, throwing him over a dozen feet. Wonder Woman would try to defend, but it is no match, as Grundy would punch her shield, sending a shockwave that would send her flying. Lex Luthor would remark how he found Grundy during one of his exploits searching for kryptonite, and he figures that his strengths might be useful for events like this. And so with a mighty roar, Grundy would have a rampage throughout the battlefield, not knowing who was his enemy or who was his ally. This would serve as enough of a distraction for the Legion of Doom to escape, but surprisingly, Deathstroke isn't among them or wasn't among them during the fight, as Lex Luthor had a different mission for him. Simultaneously, we would see Bruce back at his Batcave, trying to search on more info for the Legion of Doom. That would be until Alfred would approach Bruce, informing him that something terrible has happened. We would cut to the graves of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and both of them appear to be emptied, as if someone defiled them. We see Bruce looking upon it with fury, demanding to know who was the cause of this, and that would be until Bruce would feel a bullet graze his ear. Instinctively, he would clutch his ear and look back to see who it was, where he would see Deathstroke the Terminator on top of a nearby pillar with a sniper aimed at Bruce's head. Bruce would dodge another bullet, and this would lead into Deathstroke climbing down and confronting Bruce Wayne, who is not currently wearing his Batman suit at the moment. Deathstroke would proceed to mock Bruce Wayne, saying how it wasn't easy trying to find out Batman's identity, but once he did figure it out, everything just started coming together. And so Deathstroke would have a one-to-one fist fight with Bruce, but since he's not wearing his armor, Deathstroke manages to defeat him easily and would bury him alongside his parents. Deathstroke would then use his intercom to connect to Lex Luthor, telling him that the job is done. We would cut back to the Justice League, who are still dealing with Solomon Grundy, and Solomon Grundy would be a force to be reckoned with, as he was punched to flash away, sending him flying into a nearby building. Aquaman would try to assist by clutching Grundy with his trident and attempting to strangle him, but Grundy would grab his face and flip him over down to the ground, who would proceed to stomp on him. Cyborg would try to help by blasting Grundy away, but this would only anger the monster as it would charge towards Cyborg before Cyborg would send another blast that would actually send Grundy flying a couple feet before he stops himself, and Superman would come flying through with a tackling Grundy to get him away from civilians and throwing him up into the air. We would proceed to laser him up into the stratosphere. Cyborg would also use his arm to blast away Grundy further up before Superman would come flying up and then would crash down on Grundy, sending him flying back towards the ground, where the monster would finally be knocked out. Bruised and beaten, the Justice League returned to the Hall of Justice, where they would try to figure out their next strategy against the Legion of Doom. That would be until they hear a knock on the door, and when Superman goes to see who is it, he finds Shazam at their front door, offering his help as he heard the news about Solomon Grundy, and since Superman did him a favor, he thought it would just be fair if he did him a favor as well. Superman would smile at Shazam, saying as how his timing couldn't be more perfect. The other Justice League members would be confused on who this new guy is, but Superman would explain how Shazam is very powerful in his own right, and he should be a big help to their team. Simultaneously, we would see the grave of Bruce Wayne, and rain would pound down on the ground. But in the distance, we would see a figure slowly descending upon Wayne Manor, where he would proceed to land and dig through Bruce's grave, seeing that he's still alive, and he would bring him back to the manor and nurse him back to health. Bruce would wake up a couple hours later. We would be confused at how he isn't dead, and we would look around to see if Alfred is okay before he finds him beside him on another bed, and he would look around confused on who would help him until a figure would walk through the door, and this figure would be revealed to be Martian Manhunter, who saw the distress that Bruce was in and decided that it's finally time that he stopped hiding in the shadows, as many earth-shattering altercations have been going on recently, and he sees that the earth would need his help. And I would use this scene as a way to showcase a bit of Martian Manhunter's backstory, but not too much, but just enough to let their audience recognize who he is, as I want to save most of his backstory in a movie that I have later on down the line. And so, using the information from Batman's computer, as he slowly recovers from the beating that Deathstroke gives him, he suits up, and along with Martian Manhunter, he diverges to the location of the Legion of Doom. Simultaneously, Superman and the rest of the Justice League would go to that location as well, preparing themselves for a final battle. In the Legion of Doom base, we would see Lex Luthor working on a certain project, until Cheetah would walk into the room and ask him what he's working on. Luthor would answer coyly, saying that he's building a special project that will ensure the Justice League's defeat, and that it's nearly complete, but it just needs to load before it can fully be ready for use. And all of a sudden, an alarm would go off, signaling intruders. The Justice League, as well as Batman and Martian Manhunter, arrive on the scene, and the Legion of Doom prepare for their ultimate battle. As pure chaos ensues, as each hero would take on each respective villain. We would see both Martian Manhunter and Shazam quickly become acquainted with the Justice League ways of attack, and they would blend into the team almost symmetrically and with perfect synergy. The Legion of Doom is on the verge of defeat, that is until Luthor's project finally is finished loading, and the project would proceed to burst out, ripping through its metallic cage. We would see it slowly descend to the ground, rise up, open its eyes, and lock eyes with the Justice League. Lex Luthor would laugh, seeing as how this is the ultimate weapon, and that the Justice League stands no chance against his creation, Amazo. Amazo would be prepared for battle as he proceeds to dash towards the team, aiming for Superman first. As he proceeds to clock him in the chin, Superman would go flying, surprised at how that actually seemed to hurt him. Wonder Woman would try to retaliate, but Amazo would laser her using his laser eyes. Lex Luthor would explain how Amazo has all of the abilities of the Justice League and that he's the perfect adaptive android. Amazo would engage in a fierce battle between each of the members of the Justice League, with Martian Manhunter, Shazam, The Flash, and Aquaman as well as Wonder Woman managing to hold their own. Batman would have a bit more trouble though, seeing as he doesn't have any superpowers, and Amazo would proceed to overwhelm each of them. Seeing no end in sight, Superman would opt to feed into this monster by overloading him with energy. So Superman would start with blasting his laser eyes at the monster, which Amazo would deflect easily. Shazam would also join in, using his lightning to shock Amazo, which Amazo would also absorb, seeing as how this is only giving him more power. Martian Manhunter would also use his laser beams against Amazo, along with Cyborg's cannons. This would appear to overwhelm Amazo as he's taking all of this energy and force at a concentrated dose, and this would appear to be too much energy as he slowly chips away. The Flash would spin his arms around, building momentum and creating a vortex, which disorients Amazo. Aquaman would also join the fray, using his trident to summon as much water as he can and concentrate it upon Amazo. Batman would throw fucking batarangs, I guess. All of this energy at once would overwhelm Amazo, and Wonder Woman would finish him off using her bracelets and clashing them against each other, creating a massive shockwave, which ends the job and destroys Amazo completely. Lex Luthor is shocked as he was so sure that this ultimate weapon could defeat the Justice League, but with no more tricks up his sleeve, he is knocked out by Wonder Woman and sent along with the other members of the Legion of Doom to prison, where his public perception is now in shambles as everyone sees him as the villain he truly is. The movie would end with the Justice League reconciling with Batman, seeing as how even if they didn't like how he did things, in the end it did make sense. And the Justice League even gained 2 extra members, Martian Manhunter and Shazam. A scene of each and every member of the Justice League in the Hall of Justice discussing what their next plans should be. That is until a green light would emerge in the Hall of Justice, enlightening everything in the color green. The Justice League would be confused and step outside to find none other than Jon Stewart descending upon them. We would get a post-credit scene of Apocalypse once again, where we would see Darkseid sitting in his throne, and now he appears to be very annoyed and frustrated as he slowly gets up, murmuring to himself, "Both Steppenwolf and Atrocitus have failed me. It seems that now I must take matters into my own hands." As he clenches his fist and his eyes would intense with his Omega beams as the screen would slowly shift to darkness, with the only view being Darkseid's red eyes of death. The final movie of Phase 2 will be The Atom, which I plan to make the DC equivalent with Ant-Man, where I'd have the main character be Ray Palmer. And the villain I'd have planned for this movie will be Damien Darhk. And this would be a lighthearted film, exploring the concepts of friendship as well as family. And since that was the last movie, I also have one show in mind, and that show would be Green Arrow. And this will essentially be a one-to-one version of the original Arrow Season 1, since the CW doesn't really exist in this universe, as DC sees no need since their movies are doing quite well. So the actor would still be Stephen Amell, and it would roughly be the same. If anything, it would be more lighthearted, since the reason Arrow was so dark in the first place was to mimic Batman. But since DC already has a Batman in this new universe, I think they'd opt to have Green Arrow appear more lighthearted, as well as changing his origin a bit so he wasn't trained by Ra's al Ghul, as that would have been too similar to Batman. So his origin would be more comic accurate. And that would be the conclusion of my DCEU Phase 2. Let me know what you guys think. And once again, I really apologize that this video took so long to come out, since school and work are really giving me the business. But I'll try to release videos on a more consistent basis. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all later.